Friends, if you're someone who loves suspense, thrills, and a touch of supernatural horror, then today's video is made just for you. We're going to talk about Final Destination 3, a film that takes fear and fate to an entirely new level. This 2006 entry in the iconic Final Destination franchise has become a cult favorite for horror lovers, and trust me, you won't want to miss all the chilling details we're about to uncover. If you're watching our channel for the first time, I warmly welcome you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you stay updated on our latest videos about movies, reviews, trivia, and everything in between. In today's video, we're diving deep into Final Destination 3. We'll explore what this movie is all about, how it fits into the larger Final Destination universe, and why it still holds up as one of the most thrilling horror films of its time. From its terrifying opening scene on a roller coaster to the suspenseful sequence of deadly events that follow, this movie is a wild ride from start to finish. I'll be sharing a full overview of the movie, what makes it stand out, and where it ranks among the other films in the series. Now let's talk about where you can actually watch this movie. I'll be giving you up-to-date information on which OTT platforms currently have Final Destination 3 in their library, whether it's available for streaming, rental, or digital purchase. And if you prefer watching on TV, I'll also let you know if any satellite channels are showing this film, so you can plan a proper horror movie night right from your couch. But that's just the beginning. We're going behind the scenes too. We'll discuss the film's technical side, starting with pre-production, how the story was developed, the scriptwriting process, casting decisions, and the creative planning behind those iconic death scenes. Then we'll move into the filming process, how they shot the terrifying roller coaster sequence, what kind of special effects were used, and how the filmmakers created a believable world where death feels like an unstoppable force lurking around every corner. We'll also talk about the post-production process, editing, sound mixing, color grading, and all the small but powerful elements that give this movie its gripping atmosphere. The music and sound design deserve a spotlight of their own. The eerie soundtrack and perfectly timed sound effects make every moment more intense, and I'll break down how these audio elements contribute to the film's suspenseful tone. We'll also cover the film's budget and box office performance, how much it cost to make, how much it earned worldwide, and how it compared to the other films in the franchise in terms of financial success. Of course, we can't forget the most exciting part, the story itself. Without spoiling too much, I'll give you a general idea of the plot. In this movie, we follow a group of high school seniors who narrowly escape death when one of them, Wendy, has a horrifying vision of a roller coaster accident just moments before it happens. Thanks to her warning, a handful of people survive. But as we've learned from the previous films, you can't escape death forever. What follows is a tense and terrifying series of events as Wendy and her friends try to piece together clues and prevent death from catching up with them one by one. I'll also give you my own short review of the storyline, what worked, what stood out, and why it's still a must-watch for horror fans today. Let's not forget the amazing cast and their performances. We'll go over the main characters, the actors who played them, and how their performances contributed to the film's tension and believability. From Mary Elizabeth Winstead's strong and emotional portrayal of Wendy to Ryan Merriman's role as Kevin, we'll explore who brought these roles to life and how well they handled the film's unique tone and atmosphere. And before we wrap things up, I'll be sharing some fascinating trivia and behind-the-scenes facts about Final Destination 3. Did you know there were alternate endings? Or that the filmmakers used practical effects in some of the most shocking scenes? I've gathered some fun and surprising details that will make you appreciate the film even more. So my friends, if you're ready to revisit, or maybe discover for the first time, one of the most gripping entries in the Final Destination series, then stick around till the very end of this video. There's so much to talk about, and I promise by the end, you'll see why Final Destination 3 is such a memorable, intense, and cleverly made horror film. Let's jump in and start the video. Alright friends, let's buckle up, because the story of Final Destination 3 unfolds like a terrifying roller coaster ride. And I mean that quite literally. The movie wastes no time throwing us straight into the action. It all starts at an amusement park, where a group of high school seniors are celebrating their graduation with thrills, games, and good vibes. But lurking behind all that fun is something way more sinister. Our main character, Wendy Christensen, is snapping photos and enjoying the night, but something feels off, And that's when things go from playful to petrifying. Now here's where it gets really juicy. Wendy suddenly has a violent premonition while waiting in line for the Devil's Flight roller coaster. In her vision, the ride malfunctions in the most horrifying way imaginable, derailing mid-ride and causing the gruesome deaths of everyone on board, including her friends. This isn't just a spooky dream either. It feels real, so real that it jolts her awake, screaming before the ride begins. Total chaos erupts as she freaks out, tries to warn everyone, and in the scramble a handful of people, including herself, get off the ride just in time. Moments later, the exact accident she foresaw actually happens. And just like that, the nightmare begins. Now if you've seen any of the other Final Destination movies, you know the rules. Death doesn't like to be cheated. So even though Wendy and a few others survived that night, death has a plan and it's sticking to it. This sets the stage for the real story. A dark, suspenseful, and surprisingly clever game of cat and mouse between the survivors and death itself. There's no slasher chasing them with a knife, no monster in the shadows. Their enemy is invisible but inevitable, lurking in everyday objects, timing, and the tiniest moments. That toaster, dangerous. That tanning bed, potential death trap. The movie turns the ordinary into the terrifying. What makes the narrative so gripping is how methodically it moves. It follows a pattern, one death after another, but each one is uniquely crafted, building suspense with a series of misdirections and red herrings. You think one thing is going to kill the character, and then bam, something completely different strikes. It's almost playful in how it teases you, and that unpredictability keeps the tension sky high. Wendy, desperate to stop the sequence, starts using the photos she took at the amusement park as clues. Yes, that's right, the photos seem to hold eerie hints about how each person will die. This adds a really fun investigative twist to the story. Suddenly it's not just about survival, it's about decoding death's puzzle before the next person falls victim. The movie doesn't rely on a traditional hero versus villain arc. Instead, the conflict is built around fear, paranoia, and a growing sense of helplessness. Each character deals with the horror in their own way. Some deny it, some run from it, and some try to confront it head-on. Wendy, as the final girl, is especially compelling because she's not a fearless action hero. She's scared. She's traumatized. But she also becomes determined, resourceful, and more courageous with each loss, which adds emotional depth to the spectacle. There are some brilliant turning points in the film that ramp up the stakes. One of the most chilling moments is when Wendy realizes that the order of deaths mirrors the seats on the roller coaster. That's right. There's a pattern, and once she figures it out, it's a race against time. Can she warn the others in time? Can the pattern be broken? Every death brings more clues, more urgency, and more dread. And let's not forget the final act, where everything explodes into pure chaos and tension. By the time the story reaches its climax, you're holding your breath, second-guessing every move, and wondering, can they actually change their fate, or is it all just an illusion of control? The film toys with this idea in a very smart way. It's not just about surviving, it's about the illusion of choice, about how much control we really have over our lives. There's a deep layer under all the blood and thrills, something unsettling that sticks with you. In the end, Final Destination 3 isn't just a movie about death catching up with people. It's a narrative that plays with your expectations, builds its own strange logic, and wraps it all in a funhouse mirror of horror, fate, and fear. The pacing is relentless, the tension is perfectly timed, and the story keeps evolving with every shocking scene. It's a wild, wickedly entertaining ride from start to finish, and you'll never look at a roller coaster the same way again. Alright friends, let's dive into the heartbeat of Final Destination 3. The characters. Now, when you think of horror movies, especially ones where people are picked off one by one, you might not expect a lot of depth. But here's the fun twist. Final Destination 3 actually gives us some pretty layered personalities, and even though not everyone gets a full arc, the characters feel vivid, believable, and in some cases even surprisingly complex. Let's start with our lead, Wendy Christensen. She's not your typical horror heroine. She doesn't start out brave or confident. She's just a regular high school senior, a little uptight, a little anxious, someone who loves photography and probably plans everything out in a detailed calendar. But when that terrifying roller coaster premonition hits, everything about her life changes. Wendy quickly transforms from a stressed-out teen into a driven, obsessive survivor who's desperate to stop a deadly force she can't even see. And the best part? Her growth isn't instant. It's messy. She spirals, she struggles, and she panics. She has to piece together the mystery, grapple with guilt over the deaths she couldn't prevent, and push past her own fear to take action. Watching her evolve into someone who's not just trying to survive but actively fight back adds a real emotional core to all the chaos. Then there's Kevin Fisher, Wendy's unlikely partner in paranoia. Kevin is the ex-boyfriend of Wendy's best friend, and let's be honest. At first he seems like the usual good-looking, kind of goofy guy who's just along for the ride. But Kevin surprises us. He's more thoughtful than he first appears, and he really steps up when things start going south. What's cool about Kevin is that he listens to Wendy. He believes her. He doesn't try to take control of the situation or brush her off like we see in so many other horror flicks. Their relationship isn't romantic in the traditional sense. There's no cheesy love story crammed in, but it's built on mutual respect and a shared goal: stop the deaths and beat the pattern. Watching these two team up, learn to trust each other, and work as a duo gives the film a strong emotional backbone and makes the tension feel all the more real. Now let's talk about the rest of the group, the other survivors from the roller coaster disaster. They might not all have as much screen time as Wendy and Kevin, but they're far from one-dimensional. Take Ian and Erin, the goth couple. They're sarcastic, darkly funny, and at first seem like they're just there for edgy commentary. But as the story unfolds, Ian's arc especially takes a sharp, unexpected turn. His character goes from snarky outsider to something much darker and more intense after Erin's death. His breakdown and the way he shifts emotionally add an eerie unpredictability to the narrative, and his interactions with Wendy in the second half of the movie are laced with tension, grief, and quiet menace. Then we have the Ashleys, Ashley and Ashlyn, who bring in a bit of comic relief before delivering one of the film's most infamous death scenes. They're portrayed as typical beauty-obsessed teens, more concerned about tanning and looking good than the danger around them. But here's the thing. Even they have these little human moments that make you feel a twinge of sadness when their fates catch up with them. That's what Final Destination 3 does well. It doesn't just line people up to be knocked off. It gives each character just enough flavor, just enough personality, that when death comes, it hits harder than you'd expect. And let's not forget Frankie Cheeks, the over-the-top party guy. Yes, he's a walking stereotype. The sleazy, camera-happy dude who's all about attention and zero about responsibility. But he serves a purpose. He adds tension. He makes you cringe. And when his moment arrives, it's gruesome, it's dramatic, and weirdly, it still feels like a loss, even for a character who didn't have much growth. That's the magic of this movie. You don't need every character to have a redemption arc, because even their presence, their choices, and their personalities shape the flow of the story. The film also plays smart with relationships. There are layers of friendship, family, romance, and rivalry, but they're all filtered through the lens of fear. When you're trying to outrun death, who you trust becomes everything. Old grudges don't matter. Past mistakes get magnified. People react to the threat in their own unique ways. Some pull together, others isolate, some go numb, and a few unravel completely. This psychological tension adds an extra dimension to the movie's already intense plot, making it not just a horror film, but a kind of survival study in human behavior. So while it might not have the character arcs of a deep drama, Final Destination 3 gives you enough character richness to make you care, just enough to make you gasp when someone dies, or to shout at the screen when someone ignores a warning sign. The people in this story aren't just targets. They're flawed, emotional, sometimes hilarious, sometimes heartbreaking individuals trying to beat a system that seems unbeatable. That's what keeps you watching. That's what makes the ride so terrifyingly fun. Let's talk performances, because Final Destination 3 might be a horror film filled with over-the-top deaths and chaotic thrills, but make no mistake, the actors are working hard to sell every scream, every panic-stricken moment, and every weird little character quirk. This movie lives and dies, sometimes literally, by how convincing the cast is, and lucky for us, they absolutely deliver the goods. First up, let's shine the spotlight on Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Wendy Christensen. She is the anchor of the entire film, and wow, she brings it. Wendy is a complicated character. She starts out as your typical, slightly controlling, perfectionist teenager who just wants to enjoy graduation night. But after her terrifying vision and the tragedy that follows, she's catapulted into a full-blown emotional roller coaster, and Winstead makes every part of that feel real. You can see the weight of survivor's guilt in her eyes. Her breakdowns don't feel like over-the-top horror movie hysteria. They feel honest. There's one scene where she's reviewing the photos she took at the amusement park, trying to decipher hidden clues, and you can practically feel her desperation through the screen. Her performance grounds the movie in reality, even when things get crazy. She never lets the audience forget that Wendy is a real person, trapped in an insane situation, and trying her absolute best not to lose her mind. Right alongside her is Ryan Merriman as Kevin Fisher, and he's an unexpected highlight. Kevin could have easily fallen into the background as just the helpful sidekick, but Merriman adds this subtle emotional warmth that makes him stand out. He's calm when Wendy spirals, supportive when things get out of control, and even manages to bring some much-needed levity without ever becoming a joke. There's a believable bond that grows between him and Wendy, and that's thanks to the chemistry between these two leads. They don't force any unnecessary romance into the mix. Instead, we get a partnership built on respect, fear, and survival, and Merriman's grounded performance helps that dynamic shine. Now let's have a little fun with the rest of the cast, because there are some real scene stealers in here. Chris Lemke as Ian McKinley, the sarcastic goth kid with a sharp tongue and even sharper intellect, gives one of the film's most intriguing performances. At first, he feels like comic relief, all dark eyeliner and nihilistic one-liners, but Lemke slowly peels back the layers. After his partner Aaron dies, he doesn't just mourn, he shifts. His energy turns from bitter to quietly menacing, and he becomes this unpredictable wild card. His final confrontation with Wendy is soaked in tension, and you honestly don't know if he's going to help her or hurt her. Lemke makes Ian memorable, not just for his style but for the unsettling emotional transformation he undergoes. Speaking of Aaron, Alex Johnson plays her with just the right mix of dry wit and quiet terror. She's not on screen as long as some others, but she makes a serious impact. Erin isn't the typical scream queen. She's skeptical, blunt, and weirdly calm in the face of danger, until of course she finds herself in one of the film's most intense death scenes. And here's the kicker. Johnson makes you root for her. You want her to make it. Her performance builds that connection in such a short time, and that's impressive. And we can't forget the Ashleys. Shalane Simmons and Crystal Lowe as Ashley Freund and Ashlyn Halperin. These two are pure chaos, and they totally lean into their roles as bubbly, slightly clueless besties. Their performances are exaggerated, sure, but that's the point. They bring a kind of outrageous energy that adds humor and tension in equal parts. The way they scream, talk over each other, and obsess about their looks might seem silly at first, but when their scene turns deadly, the tone flips fast and their terror feels real. Simmons and Lowe walk a fine line between parody and sincerity, and it totally works. Sam Easton as Frankie Cheeks. Let's be honest. He's gross, he's annoying, and he's meant to be. Easton dives headfirst into the role of the sleazy, obnoxious classmate who exists to make everyone uncomfortable and eventually meet a very satisfying end. It's not a subtle performance, but it's exactly what the film needs. Sometimes in horror, a good over-the-top performance adds flavor to the mix, and Easton serves it up with zero shame. What makes all these performances work so well is that no one phones it in. Everyone, whether they're in the movie for 2 scenes or 2 acts, commits to the tone. They understand the absurdity of the premise, but they don't play it like a joke. They take it seriously enough to make you care, but never so seriously that it kills the fun. That balance is everything. So yes, Final Destination 3 may be famous for its outrageous death scenes and twisted fate-based horror, but the actors give it real emotional stakes. They sell the fear, the friendship, the panic, and the heartbreak, all while making you believe that any one of them could be next. And that's what makes the whole ride unforgettable. Now let's pull back the curtain and take a look at the master of mayhem behind Final Destination 3, director James Wong. This guy isn't just pointing the camera and calling it a day. Oh no. He's orchestrating a full-blown dance of doom, guiding every twist, turn, and terrifying near-miss with the precision of someone who clearly knows exactly what kind of roller coaster he wants you to ride. And yes, we're starting with a roller coaster because come on, that opening scene alone deserves a standing ovation for setting the tone so perfectly. From the jump, Wong grabs you by the collar and yanks you straight into a world where everything looks normal but danger is always lurking just out of frame. The tone he creates is one of constant tension mixed with a kind of twisted playfulness. That's the secret sauce right there. He doesn't just make you scared. He makes you anticipate the scares, and then he messes with your expectations like a magician pulling traps from thin air. The film has this eerie way of making you look at every doorknob, wire, nail gun, and tanning bulb like it's a ticking time bomb, and that's all about directorial control. Wong stages scenes like puzzles. Each one is a little Rube Goldberg machine of death, and he lets the suspense build with delicious slowness before dropping the hammer. Let's talk style. Wong makes bold choices that scream Final Destination. One of his best tricks is the way he frames shots to give you just enough information to get nervous. He loves wide shots that seem harmless at first glance, but the longer you look, the more you notice. Oh, there's a slippery floor, that fan's hanging a little too low, those sparks look suspicious. He doesn't just show you what's happening. He shows you what might happen, and your brain starts to race ahead. It's a genius way to crank up the anxiety without even needing a monster or a killer in sight. Death is the director's invisible villain, and Wong treats it like an omnipresent character, always watching, always waiting. And how about pacing? The movie moves like a countdown clock. Wong keeps the tempo tight but never rushed. There's a rhythm to it. A death, a revelation, a scramble to stop the next one. He lets you breathe just long enough before tossing you back into the grinder. Each sequence has a build-up that's almost operatic, with music cues rising, close-ups zooming in on small details, and the characters inching closer to something you know they shouldn't touch. But Wong never plays the same beat twice. Every set piece feels fresh, with its own unique vibe and escalating tension. From the tanning salon scene to the hardware store showdown, he crafts each moment like a short film packed with dread. Another smart move: Wong's use of visual motifs. The photographs Wendy takes aren't just props, they're symbols of fate, and Wong leans into that with a great visual eye. He finds creepy angles, shadowy reflections, subtle foreshadowing hidden in the background. These choices aren't flashy for the sake of being flashy. They're part of the story's fabric. He wants you to second-guess what you're seeing, to start hunting for signs of doom like Wendy does. He pulls you into her perspective without you even realizing it, and suddenly you're decoding the movie right along with her. And let's not skip over the mood. Wong balances horror and dark humor with such confidence. This movie doesn't take itself too seriously, but it doesn't ever slip into parody either. It walks that fine line where the stakes feel real, but the fun is always there. That tone. That's direction. It's Wong knowing exactly when to lean into the absurdity and when to let the fear breathe. It's why you can scream, laugh, and then scream again all in the span of 5 minutes. Even the quieter moments, those scenes between deaths where Wendy is piecing things together or dealing with her own trauma, are shaped with care. Wong doesn't treat them as filler. He gives the characters room to feel, to panic, to connect, and that helps ground all the chaos. It's not just about shocking the audience. It's about making you care enough that the shocks actually matter. So yeah, James Wong is not just guiding the story. He's conducting an orchestra of suspense, spectacle, and sly wit. Every death, every fake-out, every heartbeat of this movie pulses with his distinct style. He knows what he's doing and he's having fun doing it. And that, my friends, is exactly what makes Final Destination 3 such a wild and unforgettable ride. Let's zoom in literally on the visual wizardry of Final Destination 3, because this movie's cinematography isn't just about pointing a camera and catching the action. Oh no, it's a sneaky, stylish, tension-boosting element that takes the film from fun slasher chaos to a suspenseful work of visual trickery. Director of photography Robert McLaughlin isn't just setting up shots. He's building a paranoid playground where every frame feels like it might explode. From the very first scene on the roller coaster, the camera's doing more than just documenting a ride, it's putting you on the ride. The way the camera tilts, swoops, and rattles as Wendy's premonition unfolds makes your stomach drop even if you're just watching from the couch. The framing goes wide to capture the whole twisted steel monster, then snaps into tight, frantic close-ups as bolts loosen and harnesses fail. The shaky, high-speed camera work mirrors the panic Wendy feels. It's chaotic, but never sloppy. Every frame is meant to unnerve you and shove you into her nightmare. Now once we're back in the real world, the cinematography doesn't relax, it just gets smarter. One of the film's secret weapons is its use of framing to mess with your head. You'll see a character moving through a seemingly normal environment, but the camera lingers just a little too long on that leaking valve in the background. Or it tilts ever so slightly as a shelf full of sharp objects wobbles just out of focus. McLaughlin uses shallow depth of field like a magic trick, keeping the focus tight on a character's face while something quietly dangerous creeps into the blurry background. It's like visual whispering. You're constantly scanning the screen for the next sign of doom. Let's talk lighting because, oh yes, this movie knows how to use shadow and brightness like mood swings. The overall lighting design creates a world that looks slightly off, bright enough to feel normal, but with just enough gloom in the corners to remind you that death is never far. Take the tanning salon scene. All that artificial fluorescent glow feels weirdly sterile and unsettling. The soft, warm light that should feel safe instead turns menacing as the girls lie under those tanning beds. And when things start to go wrong, the flickering lights and growing heat create a visually intense buildup that matches the suffocating panic of the scene. And don't even get me started on the hardware store sequence. The lighting in that scene is genius. It's bright, almost too bright, like a false sense of security. Everything looks neat and industrial until the chaos begins. The gleam off metal tools, the sudden shadows from swinging equipment, and the shifting focus between Wendy and Aaron as disaster brews. It's all designed to keep you on edge. McLaughlin doesn't need jump scares when he's got framing and lighting pulling the strings. Even quieter moments, like Wendy obsessively studying her photographs, are elevated by how they're shot. The light is often dimmer here, colder, with blues and grays dominating the color palette. The way the photos are framed in the shots, often angled eerily or shown under strange reflections, adds to the feeling that fate is inescapable and always watching. It's not just what you're seeing, it's how the camera makes you feel like you're part of the unraveling mystery. And of course, let's not overlook how movement plays into this. The camera is rarely still. It glides, pans, follows the characters with calculated precision. There's a kinetic energy to the film that matches the urgency of the plot. Even when people are just walking through a hallway or standing in a room, the camera creeps slowly toward danger, as if it knows something the characters don't. It builds this dread not through what's shown, but through the way it's shown. You're not just watching death approach, you're being pulled along with it. All in all, the cinematography in Final Destination 3 is like an invisible narrator, whispering hints, playing tricks, and making you question every shadow and angle. It transforms normal environments into traps, makes everyday objects look deadly, and turns each frame into a minefield of visual clues. Whether it's a subtle tracking shot that sets your nerves tingling or a sudden whip pan that lands on a disaster in progress, the camera is always doing something clever. This is horror with a visual pulse, sharp, stylish, and just a little bit wicked. Now let's crack open the editing toolbox and see how Final Destination 3 keeps you hooked, jittery, and constantly scanning for the next slice of cinematic chaos. Editing in a film like this isn't just about cutting between scenes. It's about rhythm, suspense, and making sure you never ever feel safe. This movie is like a ticking time bomb disguised as a popcorn flick, and the editing is the sneaky little timer you can't look away from. First of all, let's talk flow. This film moves like it's on rails. Ironic for a movie that starts with a derailed roller coaster, but hey, it works. The pacing is tight, clean, and fast without being frantic. There are no sluggish lulls or pointless detours here. The editor, Chris G. Willingham, trims the fat and keeps every scene locked in step with a ticking clock of fate. The story is a chain reaction, and the editing mirrors that. One moment leads into the next, and just like the dominoes of death, everything connects. You're pulled along in a way that feels inevitable. And that's exactly how a movie about escaping fate should feel. Now, one of the best tricks this movie pulls is in the transitions. The shifts between normal life and creeping dread are so smooth you don't even notice until you're suddenly clenching your fists. 1 second you're watching a couple of characters talk at school, and the next the music dips, the camera tightens, and the editing slows just enough to stretch the tension. And boom! You're in another high-stakes death trap before you've had a chance to breathe. It's not flashy or jarring, it's calculated. The tension doesn't just spike. It simmers, then explodes. That pacing makes every death scene land harder, because it's been slowly winding you up like a spring. Let's break down one of those scenes to really appreciate the craftsmanship. Take the infamous tanning bed sequence. The editing here is a masterclass in misdirection. The cuts alternate between the girls casually enjoying their sunlamp session and the seemingly minor malfunctions happening around them. The rhythm is slow at first, teasing you, daring you to think maybe, just maybe, they'll get out alive. But nope. As the heat rises, so does the editing tempo. Cuts get quicker, closer, sharper. You go from calm to chaos in seconds, and the sudden acceleration makes it feel like everything's spiraling out of control, even though you saw it coming. That's pacing perfection. And it's not just the big death scenes. Even the quieter moments, Wendy analyzing photographs, Kevin researching past disasters, are edited with care. These moments are slower, yes, but they're never boring. The film knows when to let the audience breathe, but it doesn't linger. There's always momentum. These scenes are like pit stops. Short, focused, and meant to fuel the next leg of the terror trek. The tension dips just enough to give you relief, and then ramps right back up before you get too comfortable. What really makes the editing sing is how it plays with audience expectation. In most horror movies, you can feel when a scare is coming. The music swells, the camera lingers, your brain braces. But Final Destination 3 loves to mess with that. The editing sets up fake-outs and delays the payoff. You might think someone's about to die, only for the scene to stretch on just a little longer, lulling you into thinking you were wrong, until the death hits you sideways. It's like being in a funhouse where every corner looks safe but might actually be a trapdoor. That constant push and pull creates a rhythm that's addictive. You're always on edge, and that's exactly what the movie wants. Also worth noting, this film doesn't waste time. Every cut serves a purpose. The characters' reactions are shown in full. There's no weird jumpy chopping between dialogue lines. You feel their panic, their confusion, their desperation because the editing lets moments play just long enough to land emotionally. And then, when it's time to go full throttle again, it snaps right back into high gear. It's like a roller coaster that knows when to climb slowly and when to drop like a brick. The final stretch of the film, especially the subway sequence, is where everything comes together. The fast cuts, the flashes of premonitions, the disjointed time jumps. It's a rapid-fire storm of anxiety. The editing here is chaotic by design, mimicking Wendy's frantic mindset and making you question what's real and what's not. The pacing becomes erratic in the best way, like the movie is spiraling just as much as its characters. You're right there with them, tumbling toward an ending that refuses to let you off easy. In the end, the editing and pacing of Final Destination 3 aren't just technical choices. They're psychological weapons. They manipulate you. They draw you in, jolt you around, and drop you at just the right moments. Every cut builds anticipation. Every transition nudges the dread closer. And every heartbeat of silence is just a setup for the next scare. It's not just a movie. It's an experience, and the editing is the silent, sinister hand guiding you through it. Let's crank up the volume and dive headfirst into the eerie, adrenaline-pumping world of Final Destination 3's soundtrack and score. Because oh boy, This movie knows how to make your ears just as paranoid as your eyes. The soundscape in this film is more than background noise. It's a full-blown co-conspirator in the suspense. The music doesn't just follow the action. It whispers, screams, and sometimes flat-out laughs at your terror, all while syncing perfectly with every gut-churning twist. Right off the bat, let's talk about how the soundtrack kicks in during those early, seemingly normal scenes. We get those pop-punk and early 2000s rock tracks playing during the amusement park moments. Light, fun, deceptively carefree. It's the kind of music that makes you think, alright, this might actually be fun. But that's the trick. It's false comfort. The songs are upbeat and energetic, matching the excitement of the roller coaster and the youthfulness of the characters, but lurking underneath that is the sense that everything's about to crash. Literally. This contrast between the cheerful tunes and the creeping dread sets up one of the movie's best recurring tricks, weaponizing sound to throw you off balance. Now once the premonition hits and we step into the meat of the story, Brian Tyler's score starts taking over. And let's just say he doesn't hold back. This isn't your typical horror score full of random jolts and loud bangs. Tyler composes tension like a rising tide. You get these long, low, rumbling notes that swell just beneath the dialogue, slowly tightening the atmosphere around you. It's like a string being pulled tighter and tighter until you're practically vibrating with anticipation. He doesn't just go for shock value. He plays with restraint, layering sounds to build tension before unleashing the musical equivalent of a scream. One of the standout aspects of the score is how it mirrors death's presence. There's this recurring motif, an unsettling slow build of violins and synthetic pulses, that shows up when fate is about to strike. You might not notice it the first time, but it creeps in like a whisper behind the scenes. And then suddenly, it's all you can hear. The motif doesn't announce itself with blaring horns or slasher-style stabs. It oozes into the scene and subtly lets you know something terrible is about to happen. And that's when the real fun starts. Let's talk death scenes, because this is where the score gets to show off. Each elaborate fatality comes with its own mini soundtrack, perfectly synced with the rising tension. Take the tanning bed scene. There's this almost rhythmic pulse to the music, echoing the tanning bulbs heating up, and it gets louder, faster, hotter until it's overwhelming. The score doesn't just accompany the action, it escalates it. It's like the music is sweating right alongside the characters. And just when you think the crescendo can't get any higher, bam, silence. 'Cause yes, this movie knows the power of silence too. That's another trick up Final Destination 3's sleeve. Using silence like a sledgehammer. There are moments when the music suddenly drops out, and that void makes you hyper-aware of every sound. The creak of a door, the buzz of a light, the ticking of a clock. These quiet stretches are nerve-shredding because your brain starts screaming. Where's the music? Why is it so quiet? What's about to happen? That kind of auditory manipulation is brilliant. The absence of music becomes its own kind of soundtrack. Unnerving, disorienting, and almost worse than the loudest scare cue. But it's not just the score and silence that do the heavy lifting. The film's sound design, the mix of music with ambient noise and practical effects, creates a rich, layered sound world. When a character walks into a room filled with potential hazards, the music doesn't just swell aimlessly. It syncs with the clink of a metal chain, the hiss of a gas pipe, the hum of electricity. These elements all blend together until you can't tell where the music ends and the world begins. It pulls you deeper into the scene, making every small sound feel like a warning bell. And in a particularly clever move, Final Destination 3 even uses music thematically. Some tracks from the amusement park ride reappear later, subtly warped or slowed down, like haunted echoes of the past. It's a reminder that fate is still looming, still watching, still playing its twisted little game. These callbacks aren't just musical, they're psychological. The same happy tune that once felt carefree now feels like a threat, and that emotional twist is all thanks to the sound design. So whether it's the pulse-racing score that pumps through every close call, the razor-sharp shifts into silence that leave your nerves frayed, or the clever use of familiar songs to play with your expectations, the soundtrack and score of Final Destination 3 are essential players in the nightmare. They don't just support the film, they drive it, scare it forward, and make sure you're always listening as closely as you're watching. Alright, let's peel back the layers beneath the gore and wild death traps of Final Destination 3 and see what kind of sneaky themes and messages are hiding under all that chaos. Because believe it or not, this movie isn't just about inventive ways to meet your doom. It's got some juicy ideas swirling around fate, control, and the terrifying idea that no matter what you do, some things just can't be escaped. The big, flashing neon sign of the movie is fate versus free will. From the get-go, the whole premise is built around this. These characters cheat death, but death isn't done with them yet. It's like they punched a cosmic ticket that says, "You can't escape me," and the movie spends the entire runtime reminding you how powerless humans really are against this invisible force. It's this tug-of-war between wanting to live your life on your own terms and being dragged back by something completely out of your hands. The theme isn't subtle, but that's the point. Death is the ultimate rule breaker, and no one can outsmart it forever. What's fun about Final Destination 3 is how it plays with our fascination and fear of control. The characters try to cheat their fate by making lists, trying to figure out who's next, and desperately searching for a loophole. But the film makes it clear. Control is an illusion. The order of events, the way deaths happen through the smallest details, a falling pipe, a loose bolt, a leaking gas valve, shows how fragile life really is. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes it's the tiny things we overlook that end up deciding everything. It's almost a metaphor for how life feels unpredictable, where even the smallest choices or accidents can ripple out in ways we never imagined. The movie also touches on paranoia and the psychology of trauma. Once the characters know death's coming for them, their world becomes a tense minefield where every sound and shadow is suspicious. Final Destination 3 captures that frantic energy of trying to stay one step ahead of disaster, but also how that constant fear can break you down mentally and emotionally. It's like the film is asking, how much paranoia is healthy? When does survival mode become a cage? And what happens when the thing you fear most feels inevitable? Another underlying idea is the role of fate as a sort of invisible, impersonal force. Death isn't portrayed as a villain with a face. It's more like a natural law, unstoppable and impartial. This takes the horror out of a traditional monster and makes it existential. The characters aren't running from a person or a monster. They're fleeing something built into the fabric of reality. That gives the movie a grim but fascinating philosophical edge. It's death as a force of nature, inevitable and indifferent, which raises the stakes beyond just who's next to how do you even fight something like that. Interestingly, the film also explores human connections in the face of doom. The characters' relationships, friendships, budding romances, rivalries, are constantly tested by the pressure cooker of survival. Sometimes those bonds give people strength. Other times they crumble under stress. It adds a layer of emotional complexity amid the chaos, showing that while fate might be unyielding, human reactions and interactions are messy, unpredictable, and very real. It's a reminder that even in a world ruled by death, the way we respond to fear and uncertainty says a lot about who we are. And finally, there's an almost darkly comic undertone to the theme of inevitability. The film has a twisted sense of humor about how elaborate and absurd these death sequences can get. It's like fate has a cruel, theatrical flair. Death by roller coaster or tanning bed isn't just scary. It's bizarrely creative. This adds a layer of irony to the theme. Fate isn't just cold and clinical. It's almost spiteful, playing a deadly game with these characters. That mix of horror and dark humor keeps the film from getting too grim and reminds us that sometimes life's most frightening truths come wrapped in strange, unexpected packages. So, Final Destination 3 might look like a roller coaster ride of scares and stunts on the surface, but underneath, it's juggling some pretty deep ideas about life, death, control, and how we deal with the things we can't understand or stop. It invites you to think about the limits of human power and the eerie ways fate might already be pulling the strings, all while keeping you on the edge of your seat. When it comes to Final Destination 3, the visual effects and CGI are like the unsung heroes of the chaos, working behind the scenes to make sure every death sequence hits just right without pulling you out of the nightmare. This film walks a tightrope between practical effects and digital wizardry, And it's fascinating to see how those two worlds collide and collaborate to deliver scares that feel both real and larger than life. Let's start with practical effects, because in a movie that's basically one long series of elaborate accidents, getting the physical stuff right is crucial. The film leans heavily on real, practical effects for those moments when things go haywire. Think snapping cables, flying roller coaster cars, sparks, fire, and collapsing structures. These tangible effects bring a grounded, visceral punch to the scenes. You can feel the weight, the danger, the immediacy because it's happening right there in front of the camera. For example, the roller coaster crash sequence feels authentic because the explosions, debris, and metal twists are all done with a mix of physical effects and clever staging. That tactile sense of danger makes the audience lean in, gripping their seats as if they could actually hear the crunch and smell the smoke. But of course, this is also a 2006 film riding the wave of CGI technology. And that's where the digital magic steps in. CGI is used to amplify what practical effects can't do, like enhancing the speed and scale of the roller coaster crash, creating the impossible trajectories of objects flying through the air, or stitching together shots to keep the action seamless and intense. The digital effects add polish and power without feeling cartoonish or overdone, which is a tough balance. You never get that distracting, "this is fake" vibe that can kill a horror movie's tension. Instead, the CGI blends smoothly with the physical stunts, filling in gaps to keep the chaos believable but bigger than life. What's particularly fun is how the film uses a clever mix of both techniques to create those jaw-dropping death sequences we all remember. Take the tanning bed scene. The actual danger, the heat, the glass cracking, the electrical hazards, are mostly practical, but CGI steps in to show the electrical sparks jumping and the skin-burning effects in ways that wouldn't be safe or possible to film practically. The blend means you get both the visceral "oh no" moments and the surreal, almost supernatural feel of fate closing in. The subway sequence later in the film is another great example. The destruction is massive, with cars crashing and rails collapsing. While practical effects lay the groundwork, CGI ramps up the scale to make the disaster feel epic and unstoppable. The visuals don't just show destruction, they convey chaos in motion, which is perfect for a story about death as an unstoppable force. One of the best things about the effects in Final Destination 3 is that they never feel like the movie is trying too hard to show off. They serve the story, not the other way around. The team behind the film clearly knew that the visuals needed to be scary and believable first, flashy second. That's why the mix of practical and CGI feels like a smooth tag-team effort rather than a clash of styles. You get grounded moments that make you wince, followed by digital enhancements that make you gasp. Also worth noting is how the effects contribute to the film's signature style, a kind of twisted elegance. The deaths aren't just messy accidents. They're intricate Rube Goldberg-style setups that unfold like deadly puzzles. The visual effects help the audience track all the moving parts, wires snapping, bolts loosening, machinery malfunctioning, so you're not just watching chaos, you're watching a carefully choreographed dance of doom. It's like the movie invites you to admire the morbid creativity behind each sequence, and the effects team nails that balance perfectly. In short, the visual effects and CGI in Final Destination 3 don't just fill space or add flash. They elevate the story by making each death scene feel like a believable, terrifying event that's both grounded in reality and larger than life. The seamless blend of practical and digital work keeps you glued to the screen, eyes wide, waiting for the next twist in the chain reaction of fate. Step into the world of Final Destination 3. And you'll quickly notice that the set design and locations do a sneaky job of pulling you right into the story's nerve-wracking atmosphere. The film doesn't rely on flashy or exotic places. Instead, it uses everyday, familiar spots, but turns them into stages for some seriously unsettling action. That ordinary meets extraordinary vibe is exactly what makes the settings so compelling and, frankly, a bit terrifying. Take the amusement park, the movie's opening playground and initial battleground with fate. It's not just a bright, colorful backdrop for a roller coaster ride. The park becomes a character in itself. The lively, bustling environment filled with screaming kids, flashing lights, and clinking rides sets a false sense of safety and fun. You're lulled into thinking this is just a normal day at the fair, which makes what happens there hit all the harder. The The set design captures the chaos and excitement of a theme park perfectly, but there's always this lurking darkness. The creaking of metal, the dangerous machinery behind the scenes, and the tight spaces under the rides, that adds an ominous edge. Every corner feels like it could hide a trap waiting to snap shut. Then there's the suburban and school settings, which bring a grounded, relatable feel to the film. The classrooms, hallways, and suburban streets feel like places we've all walked through, places where danger usually isn't lurking. This familiarity is what makes the suspense more personal. When a seemingly normal hallway can become a death trap, it messes with your head because it challenges the idea that safe, everyday spaces are truly safe. The production design nails that delicate balance, filling these locations with realistic props and details that keep you grounded while the tension rises. The film also uses its locations to highlight the theme of inescapable fate. There's a sense that no matter where the characters go, from the roller coaster to the school to their homes, there's no safe corner. Each setting is meticulously designed to allow those intricate death sequences to unfold. The design teams cleverly incorporate elements like loose wires, unstable scaffolding, heavy machinery, or even seemingly innocent objects like tanning beds or car parts, turning ordinary things into ominous players in the story. It's a reminder that danger is everywhere, even in the most mundane places. One particularly memorable location is the subway station and tunnel, which brings a whole new level of claustrophobia and tension. The dim lighting, the echoing sounds of trains, the tight spaces, and the industrial textures all combine to create an environment that feels both realistic and incredibly menacing. The gritty details, the grime on the walls, flickering lights, and worn-down infrastructure make the subway feel like a maze where death is stalking every turn. This location feels like a natural evolution of the film's world, darker and more oppressive, raising the stakes for the characters trapped inside. Props also deserve a shout-out because they're the unsung villains here. Everything from roller coaster cables to gas valves to tanning bed timers is carefully crafted and placed to serve both the story and the scares. The attention to detail means you get a clear view of how the deadly chain reactions come to life, which adds to the tension and makes the audience feel like a detective piecing together the puzzle. What's really impressive is how the set design and locations support the film's pacing and storytelling without ever overwhelming it. The environments never feel like just empty backdrops or arbitrary choices. Instead, they're carefully constructed arenas where fate plays out its cruel game, loaded with visual cues that hint at what's coming next without giving everything away. The design strikes a perfect balance between realism and theatricality, helping the story feel urgent and grounded, yet full of dramatic flair. In the end, the sets and locations in Final Destination 3 are quietly brilliant. They take everyday places and twist them into suspense-filled playgrounds for the film's deadly domino effect. Whether it's the bright, chaotic amusement park, the familiar school corridors, or the grimy subway tunnels, each setting is carefully designed to pull you in and keep you on edge, turning the ordinary into something unforgettable and terrifying. Jumping into the dialogue and script of Final Destination 3 feels like stepping into a whirlwind of sharp, snappy lines mixed with moments of genuine emotion and tension, kind of like eavesdropping on a group of teens who are simultaneously trying to sound cool, scared, and desperate all at once. The writing doesn't waste time being overly poetic or dramatic. It's lean, punchy, and knows exactly when to throw in a bit of humor or panic to keep you hooked. One of the coolest things about the script is how it balances casual teenage banter with the heavy reality of impending doom. The characters talk like real people, sometimes nervously joking, sometimes arguing, sometimes just trying to wrap their heads around the impossible situation they're stuck in. It's this natural vibe that makes you feel like you're right there with them, stuck in that nightmare scenario, exchanging frantic theories and trying to figure out what to do next. You get some classic horror movie lines here, but they're delivered with enough self-awareness to avoid feeling cheesy. For instance, the famous "you can't cheat death" mantra gets repeated enough to become this eerie, ominous refrain that hangs over the characters like a dark cloud. It's simple but effective, turning into a kind of grim motto that reminds you just how relentless fate really is in this story. There's also plenty of sharp wit sprinkled throughout the dialogue, especially when characters try to cope with the tension by cracking jokes or making sarcastic remarks. These moments of levity don't undercut the suspense, they actually make the characters more relatable and their fear more palpable. It's that blend of humor and horror that keeps the script lively and stops it from becoming a one-note scream fest. What's really interesting is how the script uses dialogue to build relationships and deepen character development without slowing down the pace. Quick exchanges between friends reveal alliances, rivalries, and growing trust or suspicion, all while pushing the story forward. The way characters speak to each other often reflects their personalities. Some are calm and logical, others impulsive or emotional, and that variety keeps conversations fresh and engaging. On the emotional side, the script isn't afraid to hit some raw notes. When characters start losing friends or facing their own mortality, the dialogue shifts gears, becoming more vulnerable and intense. These moments add real weight to the story because they show what's at stake beyond just surviving. There's grief, guilt, and a desperate desire to make sense of the chaos. The writing here feels honest, making you care about the characters even as they're caught in this deadly game. While Final Destination 3 isn't trying to be a Shakespearean masterpiece, it does have memorable lines that stick with you, like, "It's not about chance, it's about fate." These catchphrases become touchstones for the film's core ideas and get stuck in your head long after the credits roll. They serve as chilling reminders that no matter how much the characters fight it, the script's central tension never lets up. Overall, the dialogue and script are the perfect mix of real talk, sharp wit, and emotional punches that keep the film both entertaining and suspenseful. It's like the movie found the sweet spot between casual teen drama and high-stakes horror, making sure every line serves a purpose, whether that's to make you smile nervously, gasp in shock, or feel the crushing weight of what's coming next. Final Destination 3 dives headfirst into the classic horror thriller territory, but it's not content with just ticking off boxes. It brings its own twisted flair to the genre that keeps things fresh, even as it winks at familiar tropes. The film absolutely knows it's playing in the scary movie sandbox, but instead of relying on jump scares or creepy villains lurking in the shadows, it turns the whole idea of death itself into the ultimate antagonist. That's where it starts bending genre rules in interesting ways. First off, the movie's core concept, death hunting down survivors in elaborate Rube Goldberg-style accidents, is pretty unique and gives the film a strong identity within the horror franchise world. It takes the idea of fate as an unstoppable force and uses it to build suspense in a way that's more cerebral and inventive than just running from a masked killer. This fresh approach means the tension doesn't come from a chase or a monster popping out. It's about watching ordinary objects and situations twist into lethal traps. That's a clever subversion of the usual slasher formula, where the villain is physically present and actively hunting. Here, death is invisible, methodical, and unstoppable, which makes the fear feel more inevitable and chilling. At the same time, the film doesn't shy away from embracing some classic genre clichés, but it uses them smartly and often with a twist. You get the typical teenage cast with recognizable archetypes, the jock, the skeptic, the sweetheart, but instead of these characters just being cookie-cutter victims, the story gives them room to react, adapt, and sometimes even fight back. The script peppers in moments of humor, romantic tension, and interpersonal drama that balance the scares and keep the characters from feeling one-dimensional. This mix adds layers to what could have been a straightforward body count flick. What's really impressive is how Final Destination 3 balances action, suspense, and moments of levity without letting any one element overpower the others. The suspense is constant, built not through cheap scares but through the anticipation of how the next accident will unfold. The film loves to keep you guessing, showing glimpses of impending doom with subtle hints, a loose wire here, a shaky railing there, before unleashing the full spectacle. That slow build-up is what keeps the adrenaline pumping and the eyes glued to the screen. Humor also plays a surprisingly important role. Instead of undercutting the tension, the witty banter and sarcastic remarks between characters offer a brief, welcome breather from the anxiety. It's the kind of humor that feels natural, coming from people trying to cope with something utterly terrifying. That blend makes the film more relatable and prevents it from becoming a relentless grim march. Drama creeps in too, especially as the characters grapple with their mortality and the crushing realization that death's design might be impossible to escape. The emotional stakes elevate the film beyond just a horror spectacle, giving it heart and making viewers care about who lives or dies next. So while Final Destination 3 wears its genre influences on its sleeve, it doesn't just repeat the same old formula. It plays with expectations, injecting creativity and emotional depth into its scares and story beats. It's a smart cocktail of suspense, creativity, and character-driven moments that keeps the genre exciting without feeling stale or predictable. Whether you're there for the thrills, the inventive kills, or the teenage drama, the film strikes a solid balance that's both entertaining and memorably chilling. When you watch Final Destination 3 on the surface, it might seem like just a wild ride of grisly accidents and teenage screams, but if you dig a little deeper, you'll find the film sneaking in some subtle social and cultural commentary that's surprisingly clever for a horror flick. It's not shouting from the rooftops about politics or society, but it quietly reflects some anxieties and ideas bubbling under the surface of early 2000s culture, wrapped in that glossy, adrenaline-fueled packaging. One of the biggest themes bubbling underneath all the death traps is the idea of control, or more accurately, the lack of it. The characters find themselves completely powerless against fate's designs, which taps into a broader cultural unease about uncertainty in life. Back in 2006, when the movie came out, the world was grappling with all kinds of unpredictable events, technological changes, global tensions, and a growing sense that no matter how much we plan, life can throw curveballs we can't dodge. The film captures that feeling perfectly by showing how even the most mundane moments can spiral out of control without warning. It's like a metaphor for how fragile our sense of safety really is. The movie also subtly comments on youth culture and the way young people face mortality. Unlike traditional horror films where teenagers might be reckless or oblivious, Final Destination 3 gives them moments of self-awareness and vulnerability. There's an underlying message about how young people are caught between wanting to live freely and the harsh reality that life isn't always fair or predictable. The characters' attempts to outsmart death mirror a broader human desire to control the uncontrollable, which is something everyone can relate to, especially in a culture increasingly obsessed with safety, planning, and avoiding risk. Another interesting angle is how the film touches on the idea of fate versus free will without being heavy-handed. It's almost philosophical but woven into the story in a way that doesn't slow down the action. The characters debate whether they can change their destiny or if everything is preordained, which echoes bigger cultural questions about how much agency people really have in their lives. This theme plays into a cultural moment when discussions about fate, destiny, and science versus superstition were common in popular media. In terms of sensitive topics, the film doesn't go too deep into controversial territory, but it handles the concept of death with a kind of clinical fascination rather than melodrama. Death here isn't sentimental or tragic in the usual way. It's relentless, impersonal, and almost mechanistic. That approach reflects a more modern, sometimes unsettling way of looking at mortality. Less about mourning and more about the inevitability and randomness of it all. The film also subtly mirrors cultural fears about technology and industrialization. Many of the deaths happen because of machines, electronics, or infrastructure failing spectacularly, which taps into a fear of relying too heavily on technology that can suddenly betray us. This plays nicely into early 2000s anxieties about how dependent society was becoming on gadgets and systems that are powerful but fragile. What makes all this commentary work is that it's not shoved down your throat. Instead, these ideas simmer quietly beneath the surface, enriching the story without distracting from the thrills. You don't need to analyze the film to enjoy the scares, but if you do, you'll find it's a fun puzzle of cultural fears and philosophical questions wrapped in a high-octane horror package. So while Final Destination 3 might not be a political manifesto or a deep social critique, it definitely taps into the zeitgeist of its time with a sharp, clever edge, making you think just enough while keeping you on the edge of your seat. It's that sneaky blend of entertainment and subtle reflection that gives the film a bit more bite than your average horror flick. Final Destination 3 knows exactly how to grab its audience by the nerves and never let go, creating an emotional roller coaster that's impossible to just watch casually. Right from the start, the film pulls you into this relentless game of cat and mouse with death, and it does so with a mix of thrills, shocks, and surprisingly human moments that keep you hooked and invested throughout. You're not just a passive viewer here. You're on the edge, guessing, gasping, maybe even nervously laughing, all while rooting for these characters to somehow outwit fate's cruel plan. One of the biggest ways the film hooks you emotionally is through its skillful build-up of suspense. The anticipation of those elaborate death sequences becomes almost addictive. You find yourself caught in that weird spot between wanting to look away because it's so intense, but also needing to see how the chain reaction unfolds. It's a tension that grabs your attention and won't let go, which means your heart is practically racing most of the time. The film excels at using that mix of dread and curiosity to create moments that are genuinely thrilling and sometimes downright shocking. But it's not all just adrenaline-fueled scares. The characters' reactions and interactions give the story an emotional grounding that makes the scares hit harder. When someone close to the group meets their fate, it's not just a cool death scene, it's a gut punch. You feel the loss, the fear, and the desperation building up. Those moments make the characters more relatable and the whole story more compelling. You start caring about who lives or dies, which ups the emotional stakes and keeps you invested in the outcome. There are also moments sprinkled with dark humor and witty exchanges that offer a brief but welcome release from the tension. These lighter moments help break up the relentless suspense and make the characters feel more real. Sometimes you'll find yourself chuckling nervously, which only makes the next scare hit even harder because you're emotionally riding a wave of highs and lows. That balance between horror and humor is part of what makes the film such an engaging watch. The film's storytelling style invites you to keep guessing and theorizing about what's coming next, sparking all kinds of conversations. Who will be next? How will death catch them? Can anyone cheat fate? These questions linger in your mind long after the credits roll and make repeat viewings tempting. There's a puzzle element to the deaths that invites you to pay close attention and notice the clues hidden in everyday objects and situations. It's like a scary game where you're trying to outsmart death right alongside the characters. And because the film taps into universal fears, the unpredictability of life, the inevitability of death, it resonates on a deeper emotional level. It reminds us that no matter how much we plan or try to control things, some forces are beyond our grasp. That message lingers, making you think even as you're still recovering from the latest jump scare. So, Final Destination 3 doesn't just deliver scares, it delivers an emotional punch that keeps you engaged, entertained, and maybe just a little bit obsessed. It's the kind of movie that gets under your skin, invites you to join the conversation, and pulls you back in for another round of suspenseful fun. When you stack Final Destination 3 up against its predecessors and other horror films in the franchise, it's like watching the series level up its game while still keeping that signature vibe everyone knows and loves. The original Final Destination laid down the groundwork with its inventive death sequences and the chilling idea that you can't outrun fate, and the second movie kicked up the intensity. But the third installment brings its own special twist with 3D effects, making those elaborate accidents feel even more immediate and in your face, like death is reaching out right into the theater. It's a bit of a show-off move, but one that adds a fresh thrill and ups the ante for the audience. Compared to other horror flicks of the mid-2000s, Final Destination 3 doesn't rely on a masked killer or supernatural creature stalking the characters, which was pretty standard in slasher movies of the time. Instead, it sticks with the franchise's unique formula of death as an unseen force, which keeps the tension more psychological and suspenseful than some of the jump-scare-heavy competitors. This approach gives it a slightly more cerebral edge, making the audience think about the how and why behind each death instead of just screaming at the latest ghoul popping out. In terms of pacing and creativity, the movie smartly avoids becoming a tired retread by introducing new twists in the death sequences. The way the accidents chain together is even more complex and imaginative here, with everyday objects turning deadly in the most unexpected ways. That inventive spirit helps the film stand apart not just from its own sequels but also from other horror franchises that often settle into repetitive patterns. It feels like the filmmakers were saying, "Okay, how can we make death's work even crazier this time?" When you look at the director's filmography, this one is a bit of a standout. The director leans into the tension and suspense with precision, making sure the audience is constantly on edge without overwhelming them. The timing of scares, combined with moments of dark humor and character drama, keeps the story engaging beyond just the spectacle of the kills. It's clear there's a thoughtful balance here, which sometimes gets lost in horror sequels. Compared to other teen horror movies, Final Destination 3 feels less like a typical high school horror, and more like a carefully constructed thriller with a supernatural twist. The characters are given more depth and motivation, which means the film doesn't just rely on body count for excitement, it uses character dynamics to add layers to the fear. It's a step above many films where characters are just cannon fodder. At the same time, it embraces the genre's expectations with a knowing wink. There are plenty of moments where it teases the usual tropes and then turns them on their head. For example, the classic "who survives and who doesn't" pattern is there, but the way the deaths unfold is so inventive that it feels fresh. The film is like that friend who knows all the scary stories but manages to tell them in a way that still makes your skin crawl. So in the grand scheme, Final Destination 3 manages to hold its own and even shine among similar films by blending familiar franchise elements with new twists and a heightened sense of spectacle. It's like a horror sequel that respects its roots but isn't afraid to push the boundaries and have a little fun with the formula. Whether you're a die-hard fan or a casual viewer, it offers enough originality and flair to keep things interesting in a crowded genre. Final Destination 3 might look like a straightforward roller coaster of death-defying stunts and suspenseful moments, but if you start peeling back the layers, you'll find a surprising amount of symbolism and metaphor bubbling just beneath the surface, adding a clever dimension to what might otherwise seem like pure horror spectacle. The film doesn't just show death chasing people. It uses that chase to explore some pretty deep ideas about fate, control, and the fragility of life. One of the biggest recurring motifs is the idea of dominoes and chain reactions, which shows up visually and thematically throughout the film. Those elaborate death sequences play out like Rube Goldberg machines, where one small event triggers a crazy chain of consequences. This isn't just for thrills, it's a metaphor for how a single choice or moment can spiral out of control, reflecting the delicate balance of life and the unexpected fallout from seemingly insignificant actions. It's like the universe is constantly tipping tiny dominoes, and you never know when one will set off a catastrophe. The title itself, Final Destination 3, hints at the inevitability of death as the ultimate destination we all must face. The film plays with this concept in various ways, showing that no matter how much you try to dodge or delay it, fate has a way of pulling you back in. That struggle between fighting destiny and accepting it becomes a symbolic tug-of-war, mirroring real-life questions about whether we control our futures or if everything is pre-written. Visual cues are sprinkled throughout the movie that reinforce this sense of inescapability. For example, there's a recurring use of mirrors and reflections, which often symbolize self-awareness or confronting reality. Characters are shown looking into mirrors or reflective surfaces at moments of crisis, which visually signals their forced confrontation with their mortality. It's like the film is saying you can't hide from what's staring back at you, your own fate. Another interesting layer is how everyday objects, bananas, wires, escalators, transform from harmless, mundane items into deadly traps. This flips the familiar into the sinister, symbolizing how normal life is always perched on a razor's edge, where comfort and danger are often two sides of the same coin. It's a subtle reminder to pay attention to the small details around you, because even the most ordinary things can have a hidden threat. The character arcs themselves hold metaphorical weight, too. The way the survivors grapple with fear, denial, and acceptance mirrors the stages of coming to terms with life's unpredictability. Their journeys aren't just about escaping death. They're symbolic of confronting the bigger existential question of how to live when you know that everything could end at any moment. Even the film's color palette and lighting carry symbolic significance. Scenes with bright, almost clinical lighting contrast sharply with the dark, shadowy moments where death lurks, visually representing the contrast between life's vibrancy and the looming presence of mortality. That interplay heightens the film's tension and echoes the theme that life and death are always intertwined. In short, Final Destination 3 is more than just a series of shocking scenes. It's packed with symbolism that invites you to think about fate, consequence, and the fragile nature of existence. These hidden layers turn what could be a simple horror movie into a richer, more thought-provoking experience, adding a clever, almost philosophical twist to the thrills. So next time you watch, keep an eye out for those little details. They're like clues in a puzzle about life and death cleverly disguised as heart-pounding entertainment. Final Destination 3 slots into the franchise like a thrilling middle chapter that both honors what came before and pushes the series forward with fresh twists and more intense scares. If you think about the original Final Destination, it introduced us to that chilling concept, death's design, and set up a template where fate is this unstoppable force. The sequel built on that idea, increasing the body count and suspense. Now, Final Destination 3 steps in with its own flavor, adding the spectacle of 3D effects and taking the chain reaction of doom to even more elaborate and creative heights. This film doesn't just rehash old ideas. It expands the franchise's universe by deepening the mythology around death's design. It explores what happens when the survivors try to fight back harder, and the tension between inevitability and free will becomes more pronounced. The characters aren't just running for their lives, they're trying to decode death's pattern, making the story feel like a twisted puzzle. This adds a new layer to the franchise's ongoing narrative, making the stakes feel bigger and more urgent. In terms of timing, Final Destination 3 arrived when horror franchises were racing to outdo one another with sequels, but it managed to carve out its own space. It struck a balance between giving fans what they wanted, those jaw-dropping deaths and suspense, and experimenting enough to keep things interesting. The addition of 3D technology wasn't just a gimmick. It enhanced the visceral experience, immersing audiences in the mayhem like never before. This was a smart move, showing how the franchise was willing to evolve with changing film trends while keeping its core identity intact. If you look at the broader horror genre landscape, this film's place is quite unique. It's not about a slasher villain or supernatural monster stalking teenagers. It's about an abstract, inevitable force that you can't see but feel closing in. That makes the franchise's context feel almost philosophical in a genre often dominated by physical threats. This middle chapter deepens that vibe, making audiences think about fate and chance in ways other horror films rarely do. Also, the movie ties into the growing early 2000s obsession with elaborate, Rube Goldberg-style death sequences. It fits perfectly in that historical moment when horror was exploring new ways to shock and surprise audiences, moving beyond simple jump scares to more intricate, almost artistic displays of doom. In that sense, Final Destination 3 is both a product of its time and a standout innovator. So, within the franchise's timeline, this film is like a high-energy, visually dazzling sequel that both honors and expands the Final Destination mythos. It's where the series really started playing with its strengths and experimenting with new ways to keep audiences hooked, securing its spot in horror history as the wild and clever middle child that raised the stakes and kept death's game thrilling and unpredictable. Final Destination 3 had a budget that was pretty modest by Hollywood blockbuster standards, but it knew exactly where to spend that money to get the most bang for its buck. The film's production quality punches way above what you might expect from a mid-range budget horror flick, especially when you consider all the elaborate set pieces, special effects, and that 3D technology that was still pretty fresh back in 2006. The filmmakers cleverly invested in those jaw-dropping death sequences, practical effects combined with CGI, and the immersive 3D experience, making the scares feel more intense and up close without breaking the bank on unnecessary extravagance. The smart allocation of resources meant the movie looked slick and polished, and those crazy chain reactions were pulled off with a mix of practical stunts and CGI enhancements that blended seamlessly. This approach kept viewers on the edge of their seats while avoiding the pitfall of cheap-looking effects that sometimes plague horror sequels. You can tell the filmmakers knew the core appeal of the franchise was the inventive death scenes, so they focused on making those moments shine, proving that a horror movie doesn't need a giant budget to deliver high-quality thrills. When it comes to box office, Final Destination 3 definitely delivered. It wasn't just a moderate success, it was a strong performer, proving the franchise still had plenty of juice. The combination of a loyal fan base and the curiosity factor around the new 3D angle helped fill theaters. The marketing leaned heavily into the 3D aspect, teasing audiences with promises of a more immersive and heart-pounding experience. This strategy worked well to boost ticket sales, especially among younger audiences eager for a fresh way to get scared. Audience reception also played a big role in keeping the momentum going. Fans of the series appreciated that the film stuck to what made the franchise popular, those inventive death traps and the sense of impending doom, while adding a bit of new flair. Even people who weren't die-hard horror buffs found the movie engaging enough to recommend, which helped word-of-mouth spread and brought in more viewers. The balance between scares, suspense, and the occasional dark humor gave it enough broad appeal to stand out in a crowded summer movie season. While the budget wasn't sky-high, the film's financial success showed that you don't need millions upon millions to make a splash if you focus on the right elements. Final Destination 3 cleverly used its resources to create a polished, thrilling package that delivered solid returns at the box office and kept the franchise alive and kicking for future sequels. It's a great example of smart budgeting meeting audience expectations, proving that sometimes less really is more, especially when you're dealing with death-defying thrills. If you're ready to dive into the wild ride that is Final Destination 3, you'll want to know the best spots to catch this thrilling film and get the full experience. While the movie originally hit theaters back in 2006, these days it's more about streaming and digital rentals, perfect for cozying up at home or watching with friends for some edge-of-your-seat chills. First off, streaming platforms are the go-to these days for catching Final Destination 3. Depending on your region and subscription services, you might find it available on popular platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, Hulu, or HBO Max. These streaming services often rotate their catalogs, so it's a good idea to check around. If it's currently on one of these platforms, that's your easiest, most cost-effective way to experience the film, especially if you already have a subscription. Streaming lets you hit pause, rewind to catch those clever death sequences again, or binge the entire franchise for full context. If you prefer owning the movie or don't want to rely on whether it's in a streaming library, digital rentals or purchases on platforms like Amazon, Google Play Movies, iTunes, or Vudu are great options. Renting it gives you a window to watch it a few times, while purchasing it means it's always ready for rewatching whenever the mood strikes. Plus, watching on a smart TV or a quality home theater setup really cranks up the suspense and the 3D-like effects, even if it's not actual 3D anymore. Those close calls and insane death sequences practically jump off the screen. For the ultimate thrill, if you're lucky enough to find a special screening or a Blu-ray edition that includes the 3D feature, that's where the movie truly shines. The original theatrical 3D gimmick added a whole new layer of immersion that regular viewing just can't replicate. Wearing those old-school 3D glasses, you'd get depth and sudden pop-out moments that make the stunts feel even more intense. While that experience is rarer now, certain collector's editions or limited screenings might still offer a glimpse into that unique viewing style. And let's not forget about cable or satellite TV channels. Sometimes horror-themed programming blocks or channels like Sci-Fi or AMC Classics pick up the film for their Halloween or horror marathons, giving you a chance to catch it on the big screen at home without extra cost. Setting an alarm for those special movie nights can turn watching Final Destination 3 into a shared event filled with jump scares and popcorn. In any case, whether you stream, rent, buy, or hunt down a special 3D edition, Final Destination 3 is one of those movies that rewards you for watching in a comfortable, immersive environment where you can really focus on the tiny details of each death sequence. It's a film that benefits from big screen vibes or at least good sound and picture quality. So wherever you catch it, make sure you settle in for a suspense-filled adventure that keeps you guessing and gasping right till the very end.